Hi there, my name is Duncan and I'm going to show you how to hold the bow. And I'll just explain that I'm actually not a violinist per se, I wouldn't call myself that because I don't play classical music and I haven't had a lot of training. But I have had some lessons and I think I know how to hold the bow fairly well, so I'm going to teach you what I know. And I hope that does it all right for you. You may have seen a lot of traditional fiddlers hold the bow in different ways. There are some advantages to holding it kind of like this, so this is the way that I'm going to teach you. And so the first thing is to point the bow straight up in the air and have the hair of the bow pointing towards your left. And then the next thing is to actually take it in the wrong hand. Now, this is to support it, so it doesn't matter how you take it in the wrong hand as long as you've got it and you have some room to place your right hand. Now, before you place your right hand, I want you to just hold it out in front of you and flop it around a little bit. And just observe your hand. So there's a bunch of curves there. You can see that my fingers are all curved. In fact, all the knuckles of my fingers are curved. The thumb is curved too, and well, it's not bent inward, and it's not really bent outward either. It's just kind of relaxed. So it's got a bit of a bend to it. The most important bend or curve is actually the top of the wrist. So notice the way that is. That's the way that my hand falls when I'm just holding it out in front of me. And that's what you want. So you want to keep that loose shape. And in fact, when you're playing fiddle music, you don't use the elbow or the shoulder very much. For a lot of those fast notes, it's just kind of a jiggling of the wrist, and some of the motion actually comes from the fingers. So that bounciness of the wrist is what you want. Now, of course, when you have your wrist bent this way, you can see that the top of the wrist points towards the ceiling. And that's not ideal because, you know, your hand moving up and down isn't actually going to move the bow along the string. So what you need to do is once you have this hand out in front of you, you need to rotate it towards the violin. And so the top of the wrist, instead of pointing towards the ceiling, is going to point towards the violin. And then when you jiggle your hand, you'll be moving in the same direction, well, the direction that you want for the bow to glide along the strings. Alright, so that's the shape you want, that's the motion you want. Now let's go to actually holding the bow. So I'm going to bring the bow back. And alright, first thing I want you to do is actually look at your right hand again. If you hold it open in front of you and you place the tip of your thumb to your middle finger, the most natural place for you to touch that middle finger is right in the middle of the middle finger, and maybe even this fold, this second fold of your middle finger. So that's actually the main point of contact when you're holding the bow, and the stick of the bow is going to go right in between the tip of your thumb and the middle of your middle finger. But we're not going to do all that at once. First, we're just going to place the tip of the thumb, the very tip, not the flat part of your thumb, but the very tip is going to go right here. This black ebony part is called the frog, and your thumb is going to go right above the frog and right below the winding. So you place your thumb there. Notice that if my bow was horizontal, which it's going to be eventually, the tip of my thumb is actually pointing a little bit upwards. So in other words, it's pointing away from the hair, not perpendicular to the hair, but actually like up, like that. I call that up, even though it's not up at the moment. Alright, so that's where your thumb goes. Next important thing, there should be a bend in your thumb. Okay, and next you're going to place your middle finger, and as I said, you want it to touch right there. Well, it's not going to touch because the stick of the bow is going to be in between the tip of your thumb and your middle finger. So take your middle finger and you place it there. And this is the tricky part that not everybody realizes. You want quite a lot of your finger draped over the far side of the bow. So in other words, you're not going to be grabbing the bow between the tips of these fingers, because that's, well, there's multiple reasons why that doesn't work so well, and maybe I'll explain that later. But anyway, go for this. Go for the middle of the middle finger and the tip of the thumb. But the tip of the thumb is actually not pointing towards the middle finger, it's pointing up, as I said, even though that's not really up, but you know what I mean. Okay, so you got that finger. Then notice that just naturally the index finger goes about midway along that finger too. And don't press your fingers apart. You don't need to stretch them out really far either, but just kind of a relaxed spread. And this finger, what is that? The ring finger. That goes, quite far over the bow too. Once I have this placed, you'll see it doesn't actually stick out the bottom, but it's almost sticking out the bottom. Okay, now the pinky, that's one that doesn't get draped over the far side. Instead, the very tip of the pinky goes on top of the stick of the bow. And if you have a big hand, it might even spread out to the tightening screw. But for me, it's just about there. Okay, and also, generally, you shouldn't actually touch the fingers against the hair. You can see that there's a bit of dirt on my hair there. That's because my finger touches sometimes, but that's not good for the hair of the bow, so try not to touch there. Also, don't stick your thumb actually between the hair and the stick. Don't stick your index finger in between the hair and the stick either. So I'm going to show you that hold again and rotate it a bit so you see how that is. Hopefully you see that pretty well. Alright, and now put it horizontal, and remember that we want a bend in the wrist. I'll try and hold it out more for you. So there you go. That's pointing straight up, that's horizontal. Notice that the pinky is on top of the stick. If I didn't have that pinky there, the main grip, as I said, is between the thumb and the middle finger, and that's sort of a pivot point. So if I let go of my pinky, the bow falls down like that. So the pinky is what keeps the bow perpendicular and light on the string. And I'll say that when you're doing pretty fast notes, you'll find that the string itself supports the bow mostly, and you don't need to have your pinky on there all the time. It might come off a little bit, especially when you want that very loose motion. Alright, so that's the hold. What you should do now is, go back, have a floppy wrist, hold the bow with the wrong hand, and place those fingers one by one. So thumb, middle finger, lot of length of the other fingers going over the far side of the bow, and finally the pinky on what's going to be the top of the stick. Okay, and then bent wrist. Except that bent wrist, as I said before, is going to point not so much directly up, but sort of angled in towards your violin.